So hello, welcome to the third Carney's Retro Review. And today we're going to take a break from all the radios, record players, cassette players, and audio in general, and instead we'll take a look at two top executive phones from the turn of the millennium, specifically the Nokia 6210 from the year 2000 and the Nokia 6310i from 2002. So it's the year 2000 and Nokia is already the best-selling brand in the world. And they act accordingly. They create their own standards. After all, even their picture messages, which they released just a year earlier, are a perfect example. You can send a picture from a Nokia to another Nokia, but not to any other brand. And why would they? Want to receive a picture? By a Nokia. And a lot of people actually do just that because of it. But let's forget about standards for now. At this time, Nokia is releasing tons of models that will one day become legendary. And these two pieces definitely belong among them. The Nokia 6210 is a direct successor to the Nokia 6110 from 1998, which you might have seen in the movie Armageddon, and also to the very original 7110 from the following year. It's primarily aimed at managers and demanding users. Its design and features are tailored to that. Oh, and the price too. New ones sold for over 15,000 crowns, and even at the end of their sales, the price never dropped below 9,000, which is about the starting price of, say, the Nokia 3310. I know design is a subjective thing, but in my opinion, they did a good job, even if it might be a bit too conservative. Its body is beautifully thin and weighs only 116 grams. Unlike today's phones, you barely notice it in your pocket. The controls are classic Nokia, simple, practical, and fast. That's the recipe for huge popularity. And you probably know who repeated this concept of controls a few years later, just on touchscreen phones. The 6210 has a fully graphic display with a resolution of 96 by 60 pixels and shows 3 to 5 lines. This is also its biggest disadvantage. In text messages, it displays only 3 lines of text, and the criticism it received back then was more than justified. You can see that for yourself right now in the video. Compared to the 6310, the difference is incredible. A major innovation in 1999, and thus also in 2000, was WAP. WAP originally appeared on the 71110 in its first version, but on the 6210 it was already a bit more refined. So what was it actually about? WAP was basically a heavily stripped down version of the internet on your mobile. Well, even the internet back then wasn't anything special, but on this tiny display, it was really hard to show anything significant. It was clear: news, weather, sports, some stocks, exchange rates, and so on. The average person didn't really go there because there just wasn't that much to see. Later, in newer versions, you could download games there, but I'll get to that in a bit. In any case, it was something new and we enjoyed it. Another thing is that in fact there was even erotic content on it, and you accessed WAP using HSCSD, though only Eurotel supported this technology, or CSD, which was a slower option available with Pegasus and Oscar. The fact is, it loaded the basic stuff pretty much the same way everywhere. Billing was done per minute or more, which was the standard back then. So if you went online and stayed there for 10 minutes, well, after 10 minutes, I think you'd lose 100 crowns of credit, something like that. I know it was unbelievably expensive. I'd love to show you this feature directly on camera, but I can't. The operators have apparently already discontinued it. I went to ask at Vodafone and O2 if it was still possible to use WAP. After the guy at the counter said to me, "And what is that supposed to be?" I realized I was probably in the wrong place. And from what I googled, it seems they were supposed to discontinue it sometime in 2018. So unfortunately, we won't be able to check this out. When we try to dial the connection, it just says it can't connect, but it doesn't show us anything else. But what made the Nokia 6210 quite revolutionary at the time was its memory. Huge memory for its era. Regular phones, like the 3310 for example, didn't have any internal memory at all. Everything was stored on the SIM card. That means you could save about 200 contacts on the SIM card. Some had, I think, 220, but that's probably not important, and 10 text messages, and that's it. So besides your phone constantly yelling at you that the memory was full, telling you to delete your text messages, you still couldn't really store much on it. The 6210, for example, had memory for 150 text messages or 50 pictures. That was an unbelievable amount. It's really funny today when we have half a gig, half a terabyte, or even a whole terabyte of memory in our phones, but back then, that was almost science fiction. I remember when I came to class back then, I think I was in 8th grade, and I said I had memory for 150 text messages, and everyone looked at me about the same way as if you said you had a terabyte of memory in your iPhone today. Yeah, it was just unbelievable the amount of memory that was in there. So that was the 6210. But what about the 6310? Did it bring anything fundamentally new? This model was released in 2 variants. A year later, in 2001, the classic 6310 version came out, and half a year later, in the spring of 2002, an updated I version was released. The only difference was that they added Java and the ability to install applications, but we'll get to that later. And the second thing is that they changed the backlighting. That's also how you can tell them apart, because otherwise the phones are exactly the same. It's kind of like comparing the iPhone 5 and the iPhone 5s. Yeah, basically the same phones, just with slightly better features. It was the same with Nokia back then, except instead of an S, there was an I. So we'll mainly be talking about the I, which had a beautiful and super modern light blue backlight. The size is exactly the same as the 6210. The only difference is the battery is 1 mm thinner, using lithium polymer instead of lithium ion, but in practice you can't tell the difference. And as for the features compared to the 62 series, the biggest difference is 6 more pixels in the display's height. That made it possible to add 1 more line of text. An unbelievable difference, just 6 lousy pixels. You could now connect to WAP via the revolutionary GPRS, so you paid for the data you downloaded, not for the time spent online. That means it's the same system we use today. It was introduced in 2002. They also added the American 1900 MHz band, which was a very welcome improvement for politicians or managers. If you traveled to the States, you didn't have to buy their phone there, you could take your European one with you. And since we're talking about connectivity, Nokia was the first to have Bluetooth. That probably needs no introduction. Other new features worth mentioning include a 2-minute voice recorder, task entry with reminders, a countdown timer, and a stopwatch. I almost forgot about the games. Among the interesting ones, there's Space Impact, where you can download additional worlds via WAP, followed by table tennis originally from the Nokia 7110, and of course, the legendary Snake in its second version with support for 2 players. All you had to do was pair the phones via infrared and the fun could begin. With that, greetings to Pecha if you're watching right now. But the most crucial thing about this phone is the ability to download Java applications. That opened up completely new possibilities, and honestly, it also closed them right away when you found out that the maximum app size is 30 kilobytes. To this day, I still don't understand the reason for this limitation. It's probably a hardware limitation that the phone simply couldn't handle more. It was still a 15,000 crown phone. That same year, the Siemens MB50 came out. By the way, I had it too, which didn't have this limitation at all, and it was, pardon my language, a stupidly cheap 6,000 crown phone. It was a phone for kids, for teenagers, you know, and the manager class 6610i just didn't have it. Today it doesn't matter, you have nowhere to download those apps from anyway, because WAP doesn't exist anymore. But at the time it was a shame because only a few apps were created. There was a world clock, some basic translators, and the simplest 8-bit games that could fit into those 30 kilobytes. So unfortunately this limitation really disqualified the phone. But still, it was the beginning, and most of the functions people needed back then, the phone already had long before. But even so, it was a shame. The 6610i is a great evolution of the 6210. Both phones can still serve you well to this day, and you can still use them with all 3 operators. I understand that this probably isn't a phone you'd want to use every day, but if you want to do a digital detox where you really just want to make calls or maybe send a text message, just be reachable in case something happens, then these phones are great. The 6310i is probably the most feature-packed phone with a black and white display that Nokia ever released, because the following year they released another bombshell, the Nokia 7650, and that's just a whole different league. But at the time when this came out, it was probably the best business phone you could get your hands on. And it's still usable even today. So if you're fed up with all the Facebooks, TikToks, all the notifications and people constantly bothering you, if you pick up this phone, you'll have peace and quiet. Even now you can make calls and send text messages with it perfectly. On this display, as we've shown, the text is actually quite readable. You can fit a decent number of characters on it, so it's good enough for texting. And you can get them cheaply too. These Nokias, if they're in perfect condition, you can get for under 1,000 crowns, sometimes even for 500 or 300 depending on their condition. The investment potential isn't very high unless you manage to find one with the complete original packaging. That means the original charger, a phone that's not scratched or damaged, and ideally even with the box. Then it could even be an interesting investment for the future. So, what do you think? Don't you ever want to leave that crazy brick we all carry in our pockets at home and just take a tiny phone like this with you instead? You won't even feel it. And believe me, when someone calls you, everyone will turn around because everyone knows this ringtone. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe and see you next time. Bye.